and transparency. In addition, Mr. Speaker, during this calendar year, we have scheduled a set of debt management operations to lower costs and risk in our public debt portfolio to improve on the country's debt sustainability indicators and sovereign credit rating. I look forward to support of the August House for the amendment of public debt ceiling set in the Public Finance Management Act to enable implementation of debt management operations, including financing of the fiscal deficit. Mr. Speaker, with the desire to meet our development objectives, the gap between development needs and available resources has been expanding, underscoring the need for alternative financing mechanism. Last year, I highlighted the importance of public-private partnership as an option for closing the financing gap. The current Public-Private Partnership Act impeds expeditious financial closure of public-private partnership projects. To this effect, I undertook to transform the public-private partnership framework, which included review of legal, operational, and institutional structures. In this regard, I submitted the Public-Private Partnership Bill 2021 to this House for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the highlights of the government spending priorities in the coming financial year. In light of the revenue challenges and significant expenditure demands, spending in the financial 2021-22 will focus on critical areas with the highest impact on the well-being of Kenyans and support economic recovery. Therefore, the total program spending for the financial 2021-22, excluding redemptions, amounts to shilling 3.03 trillion. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue with the implementation of the economic stimulus program in the financial 2021-22. With regards, with targets to cushion vulnerable citizens and businesses, particularly those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have in this regard set aside shilling 23.1 billion in the financial 2021-22 budget for continuation of this program. Mr. Speaker, out of this, shilling 3 billion is earmarked for youth empowerment and employment creation under the Kazi Mtaani program. Shilling 2.6 billion will go towards enhancing liquidity to businesses. Shilling 6.4 billion for improving educational outcomes. Shilling 6.9 billion for improving environment, water and sanitation facilities. Shilling 1.97 billion for improving agriculture and food security, as well as shilling 1.2 billion for recruitment of health workers. Mr. Speaker, I have also set aside shilling 1 billion for Kenya Wildlife Services to employ community scouts. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of priority programs under the Big Four agenda is a critical part to supporting sustainable economic recovery and accelerating employment creation. To realize this, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside shilling 142.1 billion to support the implementation of the Big Four agenda for both drivers and enabler projects. Mr. Speaker, the outbreak and rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated an urgent need to upscale implementation of universal health coverage to all our counties. Towards this end, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 121.1 billion to the health sector to support the various programs aimed at improving health outcomes. Mr. Speaker, of this amount, shilling 47.7 billion will fund activities and programs for the attainment of universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, specific allocations for the various activities and programs includes shilling 8.7 billion for the Kenya COVID-19 Emergency Response Project, shilling 4.1 billion for free maternity health care, shilling 7.2 billion for the managed equipment services, as well as shilling 1.8 billion to provide medical cover for the elderly and severely disabled persons in our society. To lower cases of HIV, AIDS, and malaria and tuberculosis in the country, shilling 5.8 billion has been set aside. To enhance vaccines and immunization program, we've set aside shilling 3.9 billion. Further, Mr. Speaker, we propose an additional shilling 14.3 billion for purchase of COVID-19 vaccines and related expenditure in the course of the financial 2021-2022. Mr. Speaker, to enhance early diagnosis and management of cancer and reduce the burden of treatment among Kenyans, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 450 million for procurement of cyberknife radiotherapy equipment for Kenyatta University Teaching Referral and Research Hospital. A further shilling 350 million has been set aside for the establishment of 2 cancer centers in Meru and Kakamega. Further, to improve health service delivery, shilling 15.2 billion has been set aside for Kenyatta National Hospital, shilling 11.5 billion for the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, shilling 7.3 billion for the Kenya Medical Training Centers, shilling 2.8 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, shilling 1.3 billion for the construction of Kenya National Hospital Burns and Pediatric Centers, shilling 863 million for procurement of family planning and reproductive health commodities, and shilling 600 million for procurement of equipment at the National Blood Transfusion Center. Mr. Speaker, affordable housing program is a pragmatic approach to addressing the housing problem, especially in the urban centers. To ensure success of this initiative, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 13.9 billion for the affordable housing program. The proposed allocation includes shilling 3.5 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for establishment of the company's capital, as well as for own lending to primary mortgage lenders, shilling 8.2 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as shilling 500 million for construction of social housing units. Mr. Speaker, to support the Nairobi Metropolitan Services in reversing urban indignity in Nairobi City County, shilling 100 million has been set aside for the Nairobi Metropolitan Service Improvement Project and shilling 111.2 million for construction of footbridges. Other key allocations to the housing, urban development, and public works sector includes shilling 3.5 billion for the Kenya Informal Settlement Improvement Project Phase 2, shilling 1 billion for construction of markets, shilling 1 billion for maintenance of government pool houses, shilling 750 million for construction of housing units for the National Police and Kenya Prison, shilling 700 million for the Kenya Urban Program, shilling 200 million for the Afri-City Summit, and shilling 45.6 million for the construction and completion of salt project buildings. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 700 million to support the Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project to offer an efficient and time-saving public transport. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to scale up reforms to encourage investments in the manufacturing sector to support and protect local industries. Despite the challenges brought about by COVID-19 pandemic, the fiscal and monetary policy measures that the government implemented significantly cushioned the sector. Mr. Speaker, to further promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 20.5 billion under the various implementing ministries, departments, and agencies. Out of these, shilling 2 billion will go to the Credit Guarantee Scheme to enhance access to affordable credit by micro, small, and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. Shilling 500 million will support development of various micro, small, and medium enterprises in Kenya, and shilling 600 million for provision of finances to micro, small, and medium enterprises through the Kenya Industrial Estate. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside shilling 8.3 billion for Dongokundu Special Economic Zone, shilling 350 million for development of the Special Economic Zone, Textile Park in Naivasha, Kenani Leather Industrial Park, and at the River Textile Hub, shilling 90 million for the Free Port and Industrial Park Special Economic Zone in Mombasa. Other proposed allocations include shilling 130.2 million for the modernization of Rivertex, shilling 800 million for access roads to industrial park facilities. Mr. Speaker, in order to maximize the benefits from our cash crops, the government will make further investments towards the revival and enhancement of output. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed 210.4 million for coffee industry revitalization, shilling 59.2 million for modernization of cooperative cotton ginneries, and shilling 50 million for cotton development as a subsidy and extension support. Mr. Speaker, to equip our youth with essential training and internship opportunities, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 1.4 billion for the Kenya Industrial and Entrepreneurship Project. Kenya shilling 800 million for the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project. Kenya shilling 448 million for industrial research laboratories. Kenya shilling 199.5 million for constituency industrial development centers. Mr. Speaker, in order to support our aspirations of attaining 100% food and nutrition security, I have set aside Kenya shilling 60 billion to relevant programs in this budget. Out of this, Kenya shilling 7 billion will go to the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program. Kenya shilling 1.8 billion has been proposed for the Emergency Locust Response. Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program. Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2. Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the Small Scale Irrigation and Value Addition Project. And Kenya shilling 620 million for Food Security and Crop Diversification Project. Mr. Speaker, to improve livestock production, I propose Kenya shilling 3 billion for free disease holding ground in Lamu. I have also proposed Kenya shilling 488.1 million for the Regional Pastoral Livelihood Resilience Project. Kenya shilling 455 million for the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Program. Kenya shilling 163 million for the Livestock Value Chain Support Project. And Kenya shilling 156.2 million for livestock production under Big Four initiative. To enhance animal disease controls, I have set aside Kenya shilling 180 million for sustainable successful entrepreneurship free areas in Kenya. Kenya shilling 131.4 million for the disease-free zones program, and Kenya shilling 60 million for modernization of foot and mouth disease laboratory and related activities. Mr. Speaker, the realization of the food and nutrition security also relies heavily on the sustainable utilization of the blue economy resources. To promote this, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 3.2 billion for the aquaculture business development project, Kenya shilling 3.4 billion for Kenya Marine Fisheries and Socioeconomic Development Project, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for exploitation of living resources under the blue economy, Kenya shilling 1 billion for construction of fish processing plant in Lamu, Kenya shilling 290 million for coastal fisheries infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 326.6 million for rehabilitation of fish landing sites in Lamu, in Lake Victoria, Kenya shilling 150 million for aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers, and Kenya shilling 195.3 million for development of blue economy initiatives. Mr. Speaker, in order to increase agricultural productivity and enhance resilience to climate change risk in targeted smallholder farming and pastoral communities in Kenya, I have set aside Kenya shilling 8.9 billion for the Climate Smart Agricultural Productivity Project, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion to enhance drought resilience and sustainable livelihood, Kenya shilling 178 million towards ending drought emergencies in Kenya, and in addition, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 529.5 million for the livestock and crop insurance scheme to reduce the vulnerabilities of Kenyan farmers to disease and natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, to ensure legitimacy of land ownership, I have set aside Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for processing and registration of title deeds, Kenya shilling 600 million for digitization of land registries, and Kenya shilling 105 million for construction of land registries. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 100 million for revitalization of cotton industry, Kenya shilling 300 million for mitigation of fall armyworms, Kenya shilling 150 million for establishment of liquid nitrogen plant, Kenya shilling 200 million towards the embryo transfer project, and Kenya shilling 65 million for construction and refurbishment of the Leather Science Institute. Mr. Speaker, having highlighted the expenditures under the Economic Stimulus Program and the Big Four Agenda Initiative, allow me to turn to other proposed areas of expenditure in this budget. that will support our path to sustainable and resilient economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to expand critical infrastructure in roads, rails, sea, and airports to create an enabling environment for economic recovery and employment creation. Towards this end, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 182.5 billion, excluding the provisions I have set aside for the economic stimulus program and the Build for agenda, to support construction of roads and bridges, as well as their rehabilitation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, the rehabilitation of the meter gauge railway has improved interconnectivity and reduced traffic congestion on our roads. To continue improving public transport within the Nairobi metropolitan area, I have set aside shilling 1.3 billion for railway metro lines. Further, Mr. Speaker, to expand railway transport to the rest of the country, I have set aside shilling 27.2 billion for phase 2 of the standard gauge railway, shilling 2 billion for construction and rehabilitation of Naivasha Inland Container Depot, Malaba Line, shilling 2 billion for construction and rehabilitation of Riruta, Lenana, Ngong Railway, shilling 1.1 billion to complete rehabilitation of the Nairobi-Nanyuki meter gauge railway line, and shilling 700 million to complete rehabilitation of the Nakuru-Kisumu meter gauge railway. I have also set aside shilling 2 billion for the Kenya National Shipping Yard. Mr. Speaker, to support development of our ports, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 7.5 billion for the construction of the Mombasa Port Development Project, and shilling 7.5 billion for the LAPSET project. Further, I have set aside shilling 128 million for insurance of ferries for the Likoni Channel, shilling 149 million for the maintenance of ferries and jetty headquarters, and shilling 603 million for construction and expansion of airports and airstrips. Mr. Speaker, to support production of reliable and affordable energy, I have set aside a total of shilling 71.9 billion, excluding the provisions set aside under the Big Four initiatives. Out of these, shilling 50.1 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power, shilling 11.3 billion for development of geothermal energy, shilling 6.4 billion for electrification of public facilities, and shilling 1.3 billion for development of nuclear energy, as well as exploration and mining of coal. Mr. Speaker, enhanced national security will create an enabling environment for business to thrive while aiding faster economic recovery. In this regard, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 294.5 billion to support operation of the National Police, Defense, and the National Intelligence Service. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include 119.8 billion for defense, shilling 42.5 billion for the National Intelligence Service, shilling 110.6 billion for policing and prison services, shilling 10.7 billion for leasing of police motor vehicles, and shilling 1 billion for police modernization program. Mr. Speaker, to step up war on crime and enhance support for administration of justice, I have set aside shilling 1.5 billion for the National Communication and Surveillance System, and shilling 335 million to equip the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, other allocations include shilling 4.8 billion for medical insurance for the National Police Service and prisons, shilling 2.3 billion for the group personal insurance for the National Police and prisons, as well as shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management System. Mr. Speaker, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic last year disrupted in-person learning, leading to closure of schools for 9 months. The government is determined to recover the lost time while ensuring safe learning in our schools, colleges, and universities. In this respect, I have set aside a total of shilling 202.8 billion to support programs in the education sector. Mr. Speaker, out of the proposed allocation, shilling 12 billion will cater for free primary education, shilling 2.5 billion for recruitment of teachers, shilling 62.2 billion for free day secondary education, including insurance under the NHI for secondary school students, shilling 4 billion for examination fee waiver for all class 8 and Form 4 candidates, and shilling 1.8 billion for the school feeding program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 1 billion for the competency-based curriculum and shilling 420 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, to support infrastructure development and ensure safe learning in our schools, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 4.2 billion for primary and secondary schools infrastructure and shilling 1.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical training institutes and vocational training centers. Further, shilling 1.1 billion has been set aside to increase access and improve the quality of technical and vocational education and training programs under the East African Skills Transformation and Regional Integration Project. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations to the education sector includes shilling 281.7 billion to Teacher Service Commission, shilling 76.3 billion for university education, shilling 15.8 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board, shilling 5.8 billion for Kenya Secondary School Education Quality Improvement Project, and shilling 5.2 billion capitation to TVET students. Further, shilling 745 million has been set aside for the technical vocational education training and entrepreneurship, shilling 633 million for promotion of youth employment and vocational training, and shilling 323 million for the National Research Fund. Mr. Speaker, when COVID-19 pandemic struck last year, we injected additional resources to the traditional cash transfer program to cushion the vulnerable in our society. To continue protecting this vulnerable segment, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 37.8 billion for social protection and affirmative actions in this budget. Mr. Speaker, out of this allocation, shilling 16.7 billion will cater for cash transfers to elderly persons, shilling 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and shillings 1.2 billion for orphans for persons living with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocation also includes shilling 4.1 billion for the Kenya Hunger Safety Net program, shilling 3.7 billion for the Kenya Development Response to Displacement Impact Project, and shilling 2.7 billion for the Kenya Social and Economic Inclusion Project. In addition, shilling 933.8 million will go to the Child Welfare Society of Kenya, shilling 400 million for the presidential Mr. Speaker, the most pressing challenge in our country at the moment is lack of job opportunities for the youth. This has been exacerbated by the hard economic times following the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic. In order to empower the youth and support businesses owned by youth, women, and persons living with disabilities, I have set aside shilling 10 billion for the National Youth Service, shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, shilling 454.1 million for the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, shilling 120 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and shilling 62 million for the Youth Employment and Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, to promote regional equity, reduce poverty, and enhance social development, I have set aside shilling 41.7 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, shilling 2.1 billion for the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, as well as shilling 2.8 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in the previously marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, the rapid technological advancements portend great potential to catalyze economic recovery, create jobs, and improve lives and livelihood for Kenyans. To leverage on these technological gains, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 20.9 billion to fund initiatives in the information, communication, and technology sector. Specifically, these allocations include shilling 1 billion for government shared services, shilling 670 million for the digital literacy program. Further, to fast-track the development of the Konza Technopolis City, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 12 billion for the horizontal infrastructure phase 1, shilling 3.6 billion for Konza Data Center and Smart City Facility, shilling 400 million for construction of Konza Complex phase 1B, and Kenya shilling 200 million for development of Konza Technopolis Master Plan. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of National Optic Fiber Backbone Phase 2 expansion cable, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for installation and commissioning of Eldoret Nadapal fiber optic cable, and Kenya shilling 463 million for maintenance and rehabilitation of last mile county connectivity network. Mr. Speaker, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing containment measures significantly affected tourism, sports, culture, and arts sectors. To support recovery of these sectors, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15 billion for the Sports, Arts, and Social Development Fund, Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Tourism Fund, Kenya shilling 643 million for the Tourism Promotion Fund, and Kenya shilling 90 million for refurbishment of the regional stadium. Mr. Speaker, to expand access to clean and adequate water for domestic and agricultural use, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 38 billion for water and sewerage infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 16.4 billion for water resource management, and Kenya shilling 10.8 billion for water storage and flood control. In addition, I have set aside Kenya shilling 10.5 billion for irrigation and land reclamation, and Kenya shilling 1.6 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, in order to support environment and water conservation, I have set aside Kenya shilling 9.6 billion for forest and water towers conservation, Kenya shilling 3.3 billion for environment management and protection, Kenya shilling 1.4 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shilling 8.2 billion for wildlife conservation and management. Mr. Speaker, to enhance good governance and scale up fight against corruption, I have set aside Kenya shilling 3.3 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya shilling 3.2 billion for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and Kenya shilling 7.6 billion for the Criminal Investigation Services, and Kenya shilling 5.9 billion for the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to enhance the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I propose to set aside Kenya shilling 37.9 billion for Parliament and Kenya shilling 17.9 billion for the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, acknowledging the place of devolution in our country, the county governments will receive Kenya shilling 370 billion as equitable share, representing 27.3% of the most recent audited and approved revenue raised nationally, in line with Article 2032 of the Constitution. In addition, the county governments will receive Kenya shilling 7.5 billion as conditional allocation from the national government share of revenue, and Kenya shilling 32.3 billion from development partners, bringing the total allocation to the county government for the financial year 2021-22 to Kenya shilling 409.9 billion. Indeed, this marks a substantial increase compared to Kenya shilling 353.2 billion allocation in the financial year 2020-21, a clear testimony of the government's commitment to supporting devolution. Mr. Speaker, in line with the High Court ruling on petition number 252 of 2016, directing that conditional and unconditional grants to county government should not be provided for under the Division of Revenue Act, the National Treasury is in consultation with other stakeholders is developing an appropriate legal instrument to be used to disburse additional conditional grants from the national government's share of revenue, as well as from proceeds of loans and grants to county governments. Mr. Speaker, in February 2020, the national government and the national city-county government entered into a mutual agreement in line with Article 187 of the Constitution, through which the Nairobi City County transferred some of its functions to the national government. To ensure that the process of such a transfer of functions is fully reinforced in law, the National Treasury is developing a legislation to operationalize Articles 187 and 189 of the Constitution on transfer of functions and cooperation between the national and county governments. Mr. Speaker, to facilitate performance of the transferred functions by the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 27.2 billion, which will comprise 18 billion for recurrent expenditure and Kenya shilling 9.2 billion for development expenditure. Mr. Speaker, to support county governments' capacities to enhance their own source revenue and reduce our reliance on equitable share, the National Treasury rolled out a nationwide capacity building exercise for county governments on interventions contained in the national policy to support enhancement of county government own source revenue. Mr. Speaker, the policy proposes broadening of the revenue basis while enhancing counties' revenue administrative capacities. The policy further proposes legal framework to ensure that the county governments comply with Article 209(5) of the Constitution of Kenya when formulating their revenue-raising measures. In this regard, we resubmitted the County Government Revenue-Raising Process Bill 2020 to this House in early 2020 for consideration. It is my hope that this bill will get necessary priority and approval. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government, through a multi-agency task force, has reviewed existing revenue management systems with a view to deploying one integrated county revenue management system for use by all the 47 county governments. The task force has completed its work and made appropriate recommendations for consideration by the two levels of government. Mr. Speaker, in order to provide basic services to the previously marginalized areas, as envisioned under the Constitution of Kenya, the concerned county governments have been allocated Kenya shilling 6.8 billion under the Equalization Fund in the financial year 2021-22. Mr. Speaker, arising from the High Court's ruling declaring the Equalization Fund guidelines unconstitutional, the National Treasury has developed the Public Finance Management Regulations 2021, which is now before this House for consideration. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to taxation policy measures for the financial 2021-22 budget. I will begin by highlighting some of the key measures on custom duty as agreed during the East African Community Partner States pre-budget consultation in May 2021. I'll then highlight some of the proposed amendments in the various tax laws relating to tax administration. These amendments are contained in the Finance Bill 2021 that I submitted to this House in April 2021 for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, the custom measures agreed by the East African Community Partner States and the proposed amendments in the Finance Bill 2021 are expected to generate an additional shilling 8.7 billion to the Exchequer for the financial 2021-22 budget. On custom duties, Mr. Speaker, during the East African Community pre-budget meeting, the ministers noted with concern the proliferation of cheap imports into the region and agreed on measures to protect locally manufactured products from unfair competition. The agreed measures under customs shall become effective from 1st July 2021. Mr. Speaker, to sustain the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, East African partner states have agreed to extend the duty-free importation window for raw materials and inputs for manufacture of masks, sanitizers, ventilators, and personal protective equipment remission for a further 1 year. Mr. Speaker, over the years, we have developed sufficient capacity for local manufacturing in the metal and allied subsector. This has generated job opportunities for our youth. However, the local manufacturers in this subsector continue to face stiff competition from cheaper imports. In this regard, and in order to continue protecting this subsector, the East African partner states agreed that imported iron and steel products shall continue attracting a duty rate of 25% with the corresponding specific rates for a further 1 year. Mr. Speaker, our farmers have been working hard to produce enough food to satisfy demand in the region. In particular, the sector has been meeting local demands for vegetable products, including potatoes, peas, and tomatoes, among others. To protect these farmers and the sector from cheap imports, the East African partner states agreed that vegetable products, including potatoes, peas, tomatoes, among others, shall attract a duty rate of 30% for 1 year as we await the finalization of the review of the East African Community Common External Tariff. Mr. Speaker, baby diapers are essential products and there is need to supply them at affordable prices. In this regard, last year we allowed manufacturers to access inputs for manufacture of baby diapers duty-free under duty remission scheme. This was meant to support Kenya's capacity to manufacture these products locally and create jobs. I am happy to note that many companies have responded to these incentives by increasing production. In order to nurture the growth of this industry and to continue sustaining the smiles of our babies, we have agreed to extend the duty-free importation of inputs for manufacture of baby diapers for a further 1 year. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has sufficient raw material for manufacture of leather and footwear products. In support of this sector, the government has imposed a duty of 25% on imported products for manufacture of leather and footwear products. However, the sector continues to face competition from imported products due to undervaluation, thereby discouraging investments in the sector. To this effect, and in order to enhance incomes of our farmers, the East African Community Partner States have agreed to retain the import duty on imported products for manufacture of leather and footwear products at 25% and introduce a further specific duty rate to guard against undervaluation. Mr. Speaker, our micro, small, and medium enterprises that operate in the Jokali sector have continued to thrive, creating jobs and incomes to millions of families. Of particular interest is the furniture industry that has continued to attract local artisans who have been able to provide high-quality products. However, the industry continues to face stiff competition for imported finished products, sometimes of low quality. In this regard, the East African Community Partner States agreed to extend the applicable import duty on furniture at the rate of 35% for a further 1 year. Mr. Speaker, to give impetus to the affordable housing programs and facilitate availability of locally made roofing tiles at affordable prices, East African Community Partner States agreed to extend for a further 1 year the duty-free window for importing inputs for the manufacture of roofing tiles under the duty remission scheme. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments to the Income Tax Act. Mr. Speaker, to ensure equity and fairness in taxation, I have proposed to align the Income Tax Act with international best practice, through which introduction of provisions to prevent tax-based erosion and profit shifting, as well as restrict treaty benefits to curb tax evasion and avoidance. In this respect, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to expand the definition of the term permanent establishment so as to align the Income Tax Act with international best practice. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Act 2020 introduced the digital service tax on income earned through the digital marketplace. However, the current tax provision do not cover all traders who use the digital service platform to transact their business. In this regard, I propose to expand the scope of the digital service tax to include income derived from internet and electronic networks. Further, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to align the rate of withholding tax on service fees in the extractive industry with that withheld in respect of management and professional services under the same sector. This will remove ambiguity and manipulation that result in leakage of tax revenue through characterization of income. Mr. Speaker, the private contribution made to insurance companies enjoy tax relief. However, the contribution to the National Health Insurance Fund do not enjoy this relief, despite the fund being the largest medical cover for majority of Kenyans under the universal health care. In order to support the contributors and encourage more non-registered persons to join the fund, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow the contribution to the National Health Insurance Fund qualify for tax relief at the rate of 15% of the contributed amount. Mr. Speaker, the Income Tax Act provides for a tax rebate to employers who offer internship to a minimum of 10 university graduates for a period of 1 year. These employers are allowed to deduct from their taxable income an extra 50% out of the cost of their apprenticeship emolument. In order to encourage employers to provide similar opportunities for TVET graduates, I propose an amendment to the Income Tax Act to include graduates of TVET institutions under the program. Accordingly, employers who engage a minimum of 10 graduates from both universities and TVET institutions will be allowed to deduct from their taxable income an extra 50% out of the cost of apprenticeship emolument. It is my hope that employers will take advantage of this incentive and give our young graduates from TVET institutions opportunities to gain practical experience so as to expand their employability. Mr. Speaker, last year, we revised the investment allowance regime under the second schedule to include Tax Act to introduce a new regime and retain the reducing balance method of deduction. However, under this method, deduction rarely gets exhausted. In order to cure this problem, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to replace the reducing balance method with the straight line method, which provides definite timeline for the deductions. This will provide certainty in taxation, ease tax administration, and enhance compliance. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that the current provisions in the deductibility of interest allow some taxpayers to manipulate their balance sheets to reduce their tax liabilities. I therefore propose to replace the current thin capitalization rule that is based on debt to equity ratio with interest restrictions based on a ratio of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Accordingly, any interest paid in excess of 30% of a company's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization will be disallowed in determination of taxable income. Mr. Speaker, in addition to being an international best practice, these measures has been found to be a better indicator of an economic performance of businesses, hence appropriate for determining the deductibility of interest on loans. This will guard against tax planning. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Value Added Tax Act. In order to strengthen our healthcare system, make the cost of medicines affordable for Kenyans, and step up the fight against COVID-19 pandemic, I propose to introduce VAT exemption on medicaments used in our health facilities, including decongestants and food supplements. Further, I propose to provide VAT exemptions to diagnostic and laboratory reagents, artificial respirators, including therapeutic respiration apparatus, breathing appliances, gas masks, as well as medical equipment and technologies used in the provision of medical care services. It is my hope that the suppliers of these medicament and medical equipment will reciprocate by making their prices affordable. Mr. Speaker, in order to promote local manufacturing of pharmaceutical products, I also propose to introduce VAT exemption on inputs used in the manufacture of medical ventilators and breathing appliances. This will enhance access to these products that are essential in management of the COVID-19 complications. Mr. Speaker, despite the huge potential for mineral and petroleum resources in the country, exploration and mining sector remains underdeveloped due to huge capital outlay requirements. In order to promote exploration and mining activities in the country, I propose to exempt from VAT goods for inclusive use in geothermal or oil exploration and mine prospecting. Mr. Speaker, to boost Kenya's effort on green energy, I propose to exempt from VAT equipment for generation of solar and wind energy. Mr. Speaker, to provide a transition clause to allow companies that had already signed power purchase agreements with government, I propose to amend the Value Added Tax Act to provide for a transition for the project that had been signed before April 2020, to enable them to continue benefiting from the VAT exemption in respect of taxable goods used in the project. This transition will expire upon completion of the said projects. Mr. Speaker, in order to entrench the benefits of affordable housing, including specialized facilities like the student hostels, it is imperative to develop innovative financing alternatives. In this regard, I propose to exempt from VAT asset transfers in the real estate investment trust and asset-backed securities. This will deepen our capital markets by encouraging investors to participate in the real estate investment trust. Mr. Speaker, as I turn to the proposed amendments to the Excise Duty Act, the Finance Act 2020 removed excise duty on betting. The removal of this tax generated a lot of public debate, considering that betting has become widespread in our society, resulting in negative social effects. In this regard, I propose to reintroduce excise duty on betting at the rate of 20% of the amount ordered. Mr. Speaker, innovations in the tobacco industry has led to introduction of new products such as nicotine pouches. These new products do not fall in the classification of tobacco products existing in the Excise Duty Act and are therefore currently not subject to taxation. In this regard, I propose excise duty on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitutes at a specific rate of shilling 5 per gram. This rate of excise duty is equivalent to the duty applicable to similar products under this Act. Mr. Speaker, to support the growth of service industry, particularly e-commerce, I propose to amend the Excise Duty Act so as to provide a rebate on the excise duty paid on internet data by a person who purchases the data in bulk for resale. Mr. Speaker, on the proposals to ease tax administration, Kenya ratified and deposited the multilateral Convention for Mutual Administration Assistance in Tax Matters with the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information on Tax Matters in July 2020. This convention is meant to facilitate automatic exchange of tax information between Kenya Revenue Authority and other jurisdictions. In this regard, I have proposed amendments to the Tax Procedure Act 2015 to facilitate the implementation of the convention. The convention will also enhance tax compliance by foreign taxpayers and act as a deterrent to tax evasion and illicit financial flows. In addition, I propose to amend the Tax Procedures Act to empower the Kenya Revenue Authority seek intervention of other agencies to facilitate compliance with the provisions of the Digital Service Tax. Mr. Speaker, there are various ways that some unpatriotic individuals are using to evade payments of their tax liabilities. For example, we have noted in our iTax system perennial non-compliant taxpayers, defaulters, payment returns without payment, non-filers, nil filers, credit filers, stop filers, and decliners. In addition, there are traders and merchants who are not registered at all for tax purposes. Mr. Speaker, to gather information on tax malpractices, last year, we introduced the iWhistle, a platform that enables members of the public to volunteer information. As at the end of April 2021, the iWhistle platform had received a total of 502 whistles, and we thank the public for volunteering useful information. Considering the complexities and changing dynamics of intelligence gathering and to empower the Kenya Revenue Authority tax malpractices, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act to increase the maximum reward to a person who provides information leading to the identification of unassessed taxes from shilling 100,000 to shilling 500,000. Further, I propose to increase the reward to a person who provides information leading to recovery from maximum of shilling 2 million to shilling 5 million. This will encourage receipt of voluntary information to Kenya Revenue Authority, thereby bolstering tax compliance and revenue collections. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Appeals Tribunal has been hearing tax disputes and providing judgments at a very slow pace as the tribunal sits on a part-time basis. This has left This has led to huge backlog of pending cases before the tribunal. Currently, there are 549 pending cases with a revenue implication of 107.4 billion. In order to strengthen the tribunal and allow members to expeditiously hear and conclude cases, I have proposed various amendments to the Act through Tax Appeals Tribunal, Bill 2021, which I have submitted to this House for consideration. I urge the House to prioritize this bill so as to facilitate faster disposal of tax appeals to enable us boost revenue collection. Mr. Speaker, the processing of applications under the ESC duty remission scheme has been manual, time-consuming, and inefficient. In order to improve administration of the scheme, the government automated the process under the single window system and successfully rolled out in September 2020. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen the administration of tax exemptions process for official aid-funded projects, we have embarked on automation of the application and approval under the single window system and target to roll out in the next financial year. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I must state that the preparation of this budget required a lot of balancing. It has not been an easy process, considering the prevailing weak business environment. I am confident that the plans I have laid in this budget will be realized to achieve the envisaged economic recovery that will lead to improvement of the welfare of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, it's worthy to note that our President has steered our economy through one of the most difficult periods occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. His leadership and commitment to protection of lives and livelihoods through implementation of a host of measures have not only reduced the fatalities caused by COVID-19, but also supported economic activities. Mr. Speaker, the budget I presented today has articulated additional measures that the government plans to undertake to further boost economic recovery. In light of the challenges in mobilization of additional revenue and rising expenditure demands, spending in the next year's budget will focus on critical areas with the highest impact on the well-being of Kenyans. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I sincerely thank His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta for his wise counsel, unfailing support and guidance, not only during the budget preparation process, but also in the stewardship of the economy. I also thank my fellow cabinet secretaries, the various accounting officers, and staff for their contributions to the financial 2021-22 budget process. Mr. Speaker, I also express deep gratitude to Kenyans for the insightful contributions, proposals, and suggestions that helped us to finalize this budget. In addition, my appreciation also goes to, first, the honorable speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate, the majority and minority leaders, as well as other leadership of the House and their respective class for overseeing the approval of the budget estimates for the financial 2021-22 and the related documents. Second, to honorable members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the Finance and National Planning Committee, and other departmental committees of this House, as well as the staff of the Parliamentary Service Budget Office, for their constructive input during the approval process of the budget. Third, in a very special way, I give tribute to my incredible, selfless team at the National Treasury and Planning who have worked tirelessly for very long hours to ensure that this budget and supporting documents were prepared in time as per their legal requirements. Fourth, the management and staff of Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, the Attorney General's Office, Commission of Revenue Allocation, financial sector regulators, and the various agencies under the National Treasury and Planning for their contributions and advice during the budget process. Fifth, our multilateral development partners, especially International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and all other bilateral development partners for their contribution to our development agenda through various technical and financial support. Further, I thank the private sector for their resilience and continued contribution to the economic development of this country. Sixth, my appreciation goes to the fourth estate for the active reporting on economic and financial development, as well as engagement on the financial year 2021 and 2022 budget process. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I remain grateful to my family for their unfailing support, regular encouragement, and understanding as I steer my responsibility at the National Treasury and planning at a critical time like this. I thank you all, and may God bless Kenya. Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, you recall in April 2021, I submitted to this House the budget estimates and the Finance Bill 2021, together with accompanying documents as required by the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Today, I further submit the following documents to this August House and request that you graciously receive them. 1, the budget statement for the financial year 2021-22. 2, budget policy statement 2021, estimates of revenue, grants and loans for the financial year 2021-22 budget. 4, financial statement for the financial year 2021-2022 budget. 5, medium-term debt management strategy 2021. 6, budget highlights, the Mwananchi guide for the financial year 2021-22. And lastly, statistical annex to the budget statement for the financial year 2021-2022. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, I wish to thank the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning for having made this public pronouncement on the budget highlights of for the national government for the financial year 2021-2022 and the medium term and the revenue-raising measures. And as you know, honourable members, today's budget speech will not be accompanied by the usual parliamentary courtesies given the limitations occasioned by the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic and the attendant Ministry of Health's guidelines regarding public meetings. In this regard, upon adjournment of the House and exit of the Speaker's procession from the chamber, all guests are asked to depart the precincts of Parliament at their own pleasure. However, arrangements have been made for a modest press conference by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury at Parliament Gardens. Our members may also take the opportunity to address the media on matters pertaining to the budget in the usual manner at the Parliamentary Gardens. Now, honourable members, time being 5 minutes past 5, the House now stands adjourned until Tuesday, 15th of June, 2021 at 2:30 p.m.
At the end of this afternoon's session from the National Assembly, whose highlight was delivery of the public pronouncement of the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures by none other than Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Planning, Ambassador Ukur Yatani, a 3.66 trillion shillings budget, which he says was arrived at after much with stakeholders and which has been delivered under the rallying call of job creation through continued and sustained economic growth. It has highlighted a number of priorities, policy priorities, including implementation of the Big Four agenda, health, under which the COVID-19 pandemic falls, and education, which is a big one for the current government. A live broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. At this point, we bring this to an end. We shall connect next week on the 15th of June. It will be a Tuesday afternoon when the National Assembly resumes sittings, which will be guided by a reviewed calendar that will see them having an afternoon sitting as well as an evening sitting on that Tuesday. My name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew here, it is goodbye and back to Broadcasting House.
Direction of the authorities and our submissions. And if your lordships and your leaderships grant me latitude, let me start by characterizing the pleadings before you. You will note, number one, that the pleadings before you suffer from lack of focus and particularity. Number two,